well, sorry we're running a little late, but we're in a little bit different place, and but we have more people, which is really nice. Great. We have a wonderful piano and a wonderful presenter today. We'll just quickly go through our business meeting. I sent everybody the minutes for the February meeting, so if anybody has a motion to approve those, that would be wonderful. Carol, excellent. Do we have a second?
Second.
What was the last part?
Very good. All right.
Who was that? Deborah. Okay. Say it again, Mike, because.
Oh, sorry, Kathy. Yes, second for Kathy. Can Deborah, everybody hear me okay?
Yes, I think so, yep.
Yeah, who seconded it? Tommy?
For a new idea, I'm actually, Kathy.
Kathy seconded, tell her Kathy.
Kathy who?
Panic.
Panic, right, I'm still
Kathy
here.
Panic. She didn't run out of the room yet.
Why don't you tell everybody who's here today?
Oh, yeah, so we have Elaine is here, Max is here, Carol's here, Kathy's here, and Donna Kay is here, I'm here, at least I feel like I'm here. Miriam's here, Jonathan's here, and our presenter, Dr. Anna's here. Yes, so that's good, wonderful. And we have a few people online, which is great too. So, the 5 minutes for a new idea, I'm going to switch over to the piano there.
So
Okay.
you can sit here in this chair.
There's a handout back
Yes,
there.
you can sit right there, because she has a presentation to do.
Oh, sure.
Sure.
Sorry, I forgot
Very
to warn
brief
you about
presentation.
that.
Miriam, do you have
Just
one?
give me a second.
I do, yes, thank you.
Just give me a second, Jen. Okay, Jen,
All
just speak
set?
up loud and you'll be good.
All right, testing 1, 2, 3, all good? Okay, good. So this was sort of an overflow presentation from our teachers' sight reading roundtable, and I was going to talk about sight reading strategies for collaborative playing, because unfortunately, or I don't know, unfortunately, but when you're collaborating with people, you can't stop and practice, especially if it's your first time sight reading. So these are just 4 examples I came up with. The first one is a Mendelssohn song, and just looking at it, okay, there's a lot of notes, a lot of 16th notes, and one thing I think keeping in mind, if you can have, I like to call it harmonic viewing, so just can you recognize all the different chords as you're scanning through is a good thing to do. And thinking about, okay, what's the singer going to be listening to? And I think it's the constant streams of the 16th notes, if you're able to look at that on the handout. But you don't necessarily have to just stick with what's on the page. If you're feeling like there's a lot of notes here, for example, if I'm playing, I know that that's A flat major, but I don't necessarily have to play them in that order. So maybe I just want to, I could do that. So I'm sort of reducing it down, but keeping the rhythm steady. So that's sort of strategy number 1, is to keep the rhythm going, even if you're not following exactly what's on the page. Now that sounds a little terrible, but the singer's going to be grateful for that. So keeping the rhythm steady. The second one is, and everybody knows this piece, it's a hand killer, right? Okay, so Erlkönig by Schubert. Now one way you can do this, and some people actually do this even if they're not sight reading, is, okay, that's a lot of notes for the right hand, so just alternating, that can make it easier as well. So again, that's the singer's going to be paying attention to your rhythm. So it's sort of a similar strategy with that. And then our third example is part of this Mozart Concerto in D minor, which I think a lot of people probably know the Mozart Concerto in D minor. And with the orchestration, I guess it depends on the edition you're using, but a lot of editions are going to try to include all the instruments, which is a lot, right? We only have 88 keys here, and you're only one person, you only have 2 hands, right? So just taking a look through, so I'm looking at the 1, 2, 3, the third line, this stuff here. Now how can we reduce that? Again, this is about reducing voices. So the pianist that's playing the solo part, as long as they hear, we can get rid of this voice. So that way, if you're sight reading it for the first time, eliminating some of those voices. Another thing is, right in the last line there, don't even worry about these chords, because especially if you look at the soloist, they're already covering the important notes there for the harmony. So you could just wait for them, 2, 3, 4, 1. And that's not too bad there. Looking looking at the next page, again, which voices can we reduce?
Which page are you on?
Which page?
It says number 6, yeah, sixth page, yeah.
6, okay, got it,
Mhm.
sorry.
Sorry, Jonathan, I'm trying to keep it to 5 minutes. Yeah, so the second line there, so this stuff, we can get rid of that bottom line probably with the triplets. Especially, you notice that the soloist is also playing those triplet 16ths, and that way you don't have to worry about lining it up with them. Especially if you're sight reading it for the first time, right? You're probably not going to be doing that. So you can just do, because that's what they're going to be listening to probably. And then also reducing octaves is a good thing. So on the next line, you have and then repeated chords, don't necessarily have to do that. One advantage to not repeating the chords is that way you can get your fingers ready for the next chord. And of course, depending on your level and how used to you are with sight reading, especially concerti. I find concerti are really hard to sight read. So I'll skip through the rest of these. Actually, one more thing on page 7. Again, looking at these octaves. Unless you really like playing octaves with your left hand, you can just go. Now that might seem kind of simple, but sometimes simple's good, you know, reducing things down. So I'd say that, you know, I wrote 4 different strategies here, but ultimately it's reduce, reduce, reduce. Okay. And then the final example, this part of the piano quartet in G minor by Brahms. Yeah, there it is. So this, if you look at the piano part, it's trying to cover all the parts that the violin, the viola, and the cello are already playing. Now I have a very clear memory of actually having to sight read this. I didn't want to sight read it, but when I was at Kneisel Hall Chamber Music Festival years ago, everybody was having a really good time. People had a little bit of wine, so they were excited. I hadn't, and I was like, well, it's good I didn't, because this is really hard to sight read, okay? And so with this, you look at how many things are already covered by the other instruments, a lot. So I thought, okay, I just need to be able to stay on the beat, and it goes pretty fast. You know? And I thought, I was looking through this really quickly, I thought, okay, first of all, I'm not going to try to play everything. And I thought, as long as I can keep this, because the cello is already covering all those notes, so I was thinking, okay, at least I can keep beat 1 going and keep track of where they're at, and then try to maybe get in some of the melody notes. But I'm not going to try to play all the parallel sixths, which Brahms loves parallel sixths, right? But that's a lot for the right hand to keep up with. And then looking on the third line of that, at the bottom there, now this is not easy to sight read. Forget about sight reading, it's not easy to play, okay? So just keeping, again, just the first note of each measure in your left hand. And just using the third in the right hand instead of the octave plus the third. Right? So again, reducing it down and just keeping the main beat going is going to be important with that kind of stuff. One more note on the very last page of that. Let's see, after page 68, 69, looking at these 16th notes in the right hand. One way you can do that is just block them. And with the left hand, I wouldn't worry about, again, just keeping maybe even just once every 2 measures. So blocking the chords can be useful too. I don't think, you could also do, just play the third, so that way you're keeping a little bit more of the rhythmical integrity of it. But so those are just a few little tips. If anybody has any questions, they can email me. But I try to pick really little difficult stuff there. And again, I'm just sticking with reduce, reduce, reduce. Try to eliminate scales, any technically difficult things. octave jumps, especially in that Brahms piece, there's lots of octave jumps. But yeah, any quick questions? Yeah, Miriam?
Yeah, so you're just talking about playing it for the first time, you've never seen it before, and it's with someone that you're playing along with.
Right, yeah, because it's, yeah, ideally you can kind of scan through and say, okay, you know, and the quicker you can scan through and look and say, okay, at least I can get rid of that, or these voices I can get rid of. So like I said, getting rid of scales, reducing down chords to maybe intervals or even single notes, especially if you have the melodic line.
So if you were sight reading this just now, you yourself, as if you sound really good, you must have seen this before.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, but are you that good when you first sight read?
I mean, I sight read like 2 hours a week at Immaculata, so I'm sort of used to sight reading with singers. And I remember when I was at Peabody, that was just expected. When you go to lessons, they just put opera music in front of you and you're like, what am I supposed to do with this? Singers are a little picky, you know, and they're like, well, you're not keeping the rhythm, you know.
You don't get the music ahead of time?
Sometimes you do, but in most cases it's, you know, well, I don't know what I'm singing next week, you know. So, yeah. And if you're just sight reading for fun, I mean, I think this Brahms is hard to sight read for fun, but slow movements are always nice because it gives you more time, obviously. But yeah, any other quick questions or comments? I hope that was useful. Yeah, excellent. All right, so I'm going to go back to the other place over there. Okay.
Thank you, Jennifer, that was very interesting.
Okay. All right, let's see.
Let me
Do
get
we have,
you to the,
do we have Felicia online?
yes,
Oh,
give me
great,
a
okay.
second. Just give me a second.
He's turning the speaker on.
Oh, good.
Hold on. Okay, just give me a second, it'll take a minute. Audience. Okay, give me a second to get the speaker on. This is my first time doing this. All right.
All right.
This should work.
Wonderful.
All right.
Okay. Just a quick reminder about our blog posts. If you have something you want to share, you can send that over to Jonathan. All kinds of subjects are welcome. Obviously, it could be returning back to normal. What's it like teaching without a mask? I don't know, whatever you want. And Felicia, if you want to share any updates about the Connie Murray Festival that's coming up here, just a quick note, the email I sent out recently about the festival, you want to make sure you fill out that form. I thought I made a mistake, thought that was optional, but you definitely want to fill that form out if you have students. And so that way Felicia can figure out when the volunteers are put during the day. So I don't know if Felicia wants to mention anything about that.
Felicia does not appear to be here.
Oh, she's not here? Oh, okay.
No.
Well, I guess there's no update then, except we're looking forward to having it. And for the students, since Westchester, the masks are now optional, students do not have to wear them, it's up to them. So that's probably one of the updates, I guess. Okay, and we have Marvin Blickenstaff will be returning for our master class, and the deadline for that is the 26th. So if you haven't registered for that, you can enter one of your students.
What's the deadline?
It's at the 26th of March, yes.
This
So
is for elementary?
it's well, elementary, intermediate, and I was just talking with Miriam.
A couple, maybe one or two advanced, maybe, you know, we're trying to target it more toward the younger levels. But, you know, we certainly don't want to turn away. If you want to stick a couple advanced students in there, and we're going to pick and choose depending on how many people enter their students. So.
Yeah, yeah.
How many students is he going to be able to do?
It's going to be 6 students usually, so. 'Cause
Well, it's a 3-hour
3
slot,
hours.
so I would say 3, 6, 9 tops, depending on the level.
Right, yeah. If it's,
Yeah.
Mary had a little lamb, might not be a half an hour for that.
Will that be here?
Okay. That's going to be here, yes. Yeah, it won't be in this room, right? This is our sort of.
It's going to be in the
It's
barn.
going to be in here.
It's going to be in the barn sanctuary, so big space.
Also, who's doing the choosing? Is Marvin going to choose the students? or-
So it depends. We'll see how many we get, first of all. We may not have to choose at all, you know, if it's not that many entries.
How many
So-
students, the sound cut out? We had a little internet interruption.
Between 6 to 9 students, depending on the repertoire.
Okay.
Yeah.
Part of the basis is we're going to try to be fair, you know, and
Make sure enough
yeah,
teachers are represented.
yeah, enough teachers are represented. So we'll just, I won't be the only one making decisions. I'm not gonna be on that, I'm not gonna be that
I
person.
know in the past, we've usually just given everything to the teacher and said, you decide what you want to hear. But it's different this time. with
Say it again,
a lot.
6 to 9 students?
Yeah, between 6 to 9 students.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
yeah, I guess,
that's what I did last time, and I think we found out that, well, then there were 2 students who were by 1 teacher, and that didn't go over so well with a couple people, so,
Okay.
yeah.
trying to figure that out, yeah. All right, good, and so upcoming events, we do have the Connie Murray Festival on March 19th. Primetime Players is still on, Carol, right, for March 22nd?
As far as I know, yes.
Do we have any special topic? Springtime?
We need to, hey, right now, just come. We'll figure
Show
out
up
the
for
time.
the,
We'll show up and we'll
up
figure out
and
the
make
time.
music. Okay, there we go.
But we're looking, we're always looking ahead for, the recital, the teacher's recital, which
Right.
should be able to be in person. So if there's duets or 2 piano numbers, bring them, we'll sight read them and go from there.
Great, excellent. I see Felicia coming in.
And like I say, if nobody shows up by 10 o'clock, nobody's called me or emailed me, I go on with my day.
Great, all right, excellent. And then, of course, the master class with Marvin's going to be on Saturday, April 9th, 2 to 5 p.m. That's going to be here in the church sanctuary, not in the parlor room here. So there's plenty of space in there. It'll be really
Sure, right
nice.
there for you.
Is Joy here if she wants to share about the Super Saturday or post Super Saturday update? That would be great. We need some chairs.
Yeah, I can grab a chair from back here. Jonathan, can I just take one of those small chairs from you?
I could just.
Jane and Felicia have joined us.
Such a nice problem to have, is so many.
There we go.
That's great.
I can move forward, just a select group. You mind me? You mind me?
Jane, where do you want to sit?
Right here.
Okay.
Jonathan, you need any help?
I'm okay for right now, but sit next to me.
All right, yeah. All right, is Joy able to?
Joy? Okay, I'll get her. Let me just-
Hi, can you hear me?
Joy?
I
Yes.
cannot hear you.
Okay, get in front of the microphone.
Okay, if you can hear me, I'm just going to talk. All right.
Good.
That's great, yeah, thank you, Joy.
I think that the
Okay, hold on.
you guys are so frozen up over on the. I mean, maybe the connection at the church is pretty bad, but hopefully you can hear me. We did end up wrapping up our Super Saturday on February 19, and it was a success. I got to come and have my recital with my students in the recital hall, and Ping was there, and her students were showing up, and I didn't hear anything bad, so I think that well. For next year's Super Saturday, I want to have a meeting soon with the renewal committee. And I believe Deborah might be part of the renewal committee. I'm not really sure, but I'll be calling on the rest of you by email to try to get that going for next year, which is going to be January 21st, the date of Super Saturday next year. That's all I got.
All right, thank you, Joy, that's great. I'm glad people were able to end up playing after all. That's good. Thank you for organizing that. Yes. Thank you, Joy. Okay.
Yeah.
I think. Felicia, do you want to give an update on Connie Murray?
Come over
briefly?
here to do it though.
Okay, yeah. Connie Murray Festival is happening on March 19th, and I think we need to, remember how I had that form with extremely specific time requests?
Right.
I think we need to close that like Wednesday, like tomorrow. I think I actually need to close that tomorrow to get the scheduling done, because that's
Okay.
influencing scheduling. I don't remember the timeline of when you want schedules to come out, but it should come out this week. Yeah, it will come out this week. And then, that form is specifically for people who need extremely specific time requests. I've gotten several emails like, this student needs to go at exactly this time. So that's what's happening on that side. But anything else you wanted to know about?
So after it closes tomorrow, when would be the closest, because I'm having some students ask what the schedule is. When would be the nearest time that you could have the scheduling done? Like,
If I really applied myself Thursday.
Wow, you mean this week?
Yeah, definitely this week.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
I mean, like,
Wow.
either way, it's gonna happen this week. Whether it
Okay.
happens on Thursday is another question, but yeah, I think I can make that time work.
So definitely by the weekends at least. That's
Yeah.
great, thank you.
Yeah.
Uh,
I think I'll just walk around this way.
Is it gonna be at Westchester,
Yes.
Yeah,
in the usual place?
yeah.
I guess so. How's it going?
Okay.
Oh, and once again, it has changed, that masks are optional. Oh, you did say that.
Yeah, optional for the masks, so, yeah, yeah.
We don't have the best.
All right,
Wi-Fi
good.
connection, so it's kind
We're very
Are you
excited.
gonna put that in an email?
It's on the website. It's been changed on the website.
Okay, all right.
Do you
Which
want it,
website
do you
you
want
talking
it in the email?
It wouldn't hurt.
Okay, all right. I'll do
about?
that.
Yeah, if you send it, when Felicia sends it out, or when she sends it out, the schedule, maybe just
Oh,
put that on it, yeah.
That's what they want to say mask optional on your email that goes out to the scheduling.
All right. Okay, very good. All right, so Miriam, our program chair, is going to introduce our wonderful guest. So Miriam, take it away.
Okay. All right, so, and I just, let's see, Kislitsyna. So Dr. Anna Kislitsyna was born into a family of musicians. Both her parents and her brother are professional musicians. She's a pianist and a harpsichordist trained in the Russian piano tradition. She made her solo debut at age 10 with the Omsk Symphony Orchestra. She's in high demand as a soloist, a collaborative pianist, and educator. Some of her recent performances include a Shostakovich Concerto with Helena Symphony, an inaugural solo on a new harpsichord with the Omsk Philharmonic, a CD release concert at Carnegie Hall, and a tour in China. She is also a recording artist, having completed 8 CDs of contemporary chamber music, and is currently working on her 9th CD of modern music. Dr. Kislitsyna currently serves on the faculty at Haverford College, as well as the Nellie Berman School of Music and the Philadelphia International Music Festival. Her students have won awards in multiple international competitions, such as From the Top, the London International Piano Competition, the Gershwin International Piano Competition, the Greenfield Competition, the Boulder Bach Festival, of course, among others. Additionally, her students' achievements include performing with the Philadelphia Orchestra as young as age 12, and even a solo recital at the White House. After completing her doctorate at Temple, she went on to postgraduate work at Novosibirsk State Conservatory in Russia. She also holds a master's from Westchester University, where she studied with Dr. Igor Voznyansky. In today's program, she gives us a tour of the form, style, learning approach, and the keyboard instruments of the Baroque era. Dr. Kislitsyna will help us discover the accessibility of Bach's preludes for our youngest students through college age. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Anna
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to join you. And this is such an interesting topic for me. I keep learning Bach my entire life and feel like there's always a huge field ahead to keep learning. I'm sure everybody feels this way. As many books I read about Bach, as much music I play of Bach, I still feel like it is so much to learn about him and about his music, about his teaching approach, and about his son's compositions and so on. My connection to Bach started very early. I started playing piano at age 5, and my first teacher was specialist in Bach's music. She published several books and many articles about his music, so I started learning from her and was studying with this teacher for 10 years. then it was very helpful that I was not just playing Bach on piano, but also on organ and harpsichord. And my second doctorate degree at Campbell University, I did not only in piano performance, but also harpsichord performance. And I was touring Goldberg variations in Europe, playing on piano and on harpsichord. So this experience really helps to understand Bach better. I was exploring Bach's sons' compositions just to see how much of Bach's knowledge was passed through their compositions and how much it changed as well. It is really helpful in transition to classical music because Bach's sons are really in between. So that was also a very interesting experience. Today I made small plan, you probably all received this. It's difficult to accomplish all details about Bach just in one presentation, so we'll try to do my best. And I'm sure that many things I will be talking about, you know, of course, because many things are obvious. But I guess it doesn't hurt to mention some stuff could be maybe seen slightly differently or just reminded. So first I wanted to check with you history and purpose of Bach's short preludes. For whom were these compositions written? Bach was a great composer and great performer, but he was also an amazing teacher. Apparently he was spending a lot of time teaching, and he was very dedicated teacher. He, having very busy schedule, he was still able to spend a lot of time, and he was very serious about teaching. He had his approach, his method, and he made sure that this method works and his students follow his instructions. It was not just occasional, it was a long-term method, and he was quite strict teacher, very dedicated one. And he was very successful as a teacher. We can see it through his sons. He had 4 sons who became famous composers. They were all writing in different styles. They had very different careers. Last son, Johann Christian Bach, moved to Italy first, and he changed his religion there, and he changed his style to galant style. And eventually he moved to London, and he was one of the most famous Bachs during his lifetime. He was working for the royal family and was very successful. Not many know that Bach also had 5th son who he had some mental problems. Nevertheless, Bach still taught him music, and he played several different instruments. He never was able to accomplish any professional career. But it was known that he was reading music very well, and he was practicing, and Johann Sebastian Bach was spending time to make sure that even this son, who is not going to have any professional career, was well educated and was playing instruments. According to Bach's students, he had following approach. He would start teaching from exercises. He would not start teaching from pieces and melodies. He would compose some sequences, some trills exercises, some repetitions, and he would make students practicing these exercises for months and sometimes even maybe longer. And only when they perfect this, he would shift to pieces. These pieces would be short preludes. Short preludes would be based on these exercises he would introduce his students to. It is a very interesting method, but it is not unique. Apparently, many Baroque era teachers would teach this way. Another composer could be Couperin. Couperin had very detailed method about how to play harpsichord. And most of this method is about how to play fingering, ornaments, how to phrase, all of this. And then he provides about 100 exercises, which he insists that need to be played in perfect way. And only then they can start playing preludes and not otherwise. And he's quite strict, like you're not moving to the music until you perfect these exercises. So Bach was doing similar way. And most of these preludes, short preludes, appear in the journals and books of his sons and his students, so it was the repertoire he was really using. Other compositions were inventions and symphonies. And in preview to Inventions, Bach says that he writes these compositions to teach counterpoint style. But most importantly, he wrote them to teach students to have this perfect touch on harpsichord. Not just continuous style, not just obbligato in 2-3 voices, but also beautiful cantabile style on harpsichord, which is great to know because for him it was important to have the singing style on keyboard instrument. And that was the purpose, main purpose of writing Inventions and Preludes. Just checking my notes. And I don't know if we have PowerPoint.
I do.
Can I ask a question?
Yes?
Who was the fifth son?
Fifth son, I don't remember his name. He didn't have long life, and we don't know much about him, just like very few facts. When I was researching about his sons, I was really researching about how was the connection of the father to his sons. The most important son for him was his oldest son, Wilhelm Friedemann Bach, and it looks like he put so much effort in him because there are manuscripts which still available, where he was practicing with his son, and he spent so much time. He wrote special exercises. He was preparing him for his auditions. He was including all his connections in the music world to make him perfect and successful. With so much pressure on him. And Wilhelm Friedemann was very talented. He was very well educated, but it looks like something was not going right with him. He had maybe some depression. Some students of Bach say that he had problems with alcohol, but he would never stay in the same position. He had dreamlike career. He won several positions, which would be like absolutely incredible for the young man. And looks like Johann Sebastian Bach would really love him to have these positions in like prestigious churches or as a royal family composer. But he could not stay long. It was like, we don't know reasons, but he would leave like in a few months or do not show up at all. And then he had multiple years, like about 15 or more years of just concert life. He was traveling, playing organ, he was a virtuoso. And then when he returned, he didn't have really any job, and he ended up his life being poor and broken. So even he wrote so much brilliant music. Music is just amazing. This son whom Bach admired was not really meeting his expectations. And probably the most strong was Carl Philipp Emanuel. He was following Bach's ideas, and he was continuing tradition and was very successful as well. So third son was educated as a lawyer as well. And he was writing in galant style because that was a requirement for his, the aristocrat who hired him. So that was very different style. Galant style was similar to classical style. And then last son, who family, I guess it was some tension. Johann Christian Bach, he rejected religion. He moved to Italy when he was 16. And he was a great disappointment for his father because he didn't follow what the plan was. I guess Bach had plan for each son, and that probably was, he was having this plan of success, and he had certain ideal idea for each of them. And not everybody was able to follow, was so much pressure, I guess. So Johann Christian Bach was able to escape the house, and family was joking about him, like not considering him seriously, though he was one of the most successful during his lifetime. And he was the one meeting Mozart when Mozart was traveling to England and helping him with his concerts. And his music, every son had amazing music. They're all different. There's a little bit of Bach in each of them. Probably Carl Philipp Emanuel is most connected to his father, but each of them were individuals. They were not just copies, like copies of his father. of their father, sorry. So next thing is instruments. Probably this. Bach wrote all his compositions for clavier, and clavier included several instruments, which would be clavichord, organ positive, small version of organ, or harpsichord. And because people had multiple instruments at their houses, it would be not useful to suggest some particular instrument, because then it would limit music from performances. Some people would have small spinets or Italian instruments, which would be smaller, compass. Some people would have French and German style double manual instruments, harpsichord. Some would have small clavichord, which would not have much range for the sound and not many notes as well. So that would be very strange to just limit people writing for specific instrument. But there are exceptions. Goldberg variations are written for double manual harpsichord, and that is probably the most detailed score Bach ever wrote, because he suggests tempos, he suggests even which hand should be above, because normally composers would never suggest how to use two manual. For one manual or two manuals, you just use it in your own way. It is your way of creativity, how to arrange things. You can do double string on the harpsichord, you can do one hand on upper manual or backwards like that, or you can play both on upper manual, both on lower manual. It would be every performer's choice. Though in Goldberg variations, Bach was specific. He wrote which hand should be on upper manual, which on lower manual, and he has lots of crossing. This composition has just constant crossing, very uncomfortable to play it on piano for that reason. And he was specific which hand goes above, so it is just amazing how much instruction he gives. There is recent edition of Goldberg variations by Baron Reiter, and I think it is based on 2014 recently discovered manuscript where Bach had few details which were never mentioned before. And there is one variation which was always played slowly as a Sicilian, just slow Sicilian variation. And then after this manuscript was discovered, people realized that all these times we played wrong, because Bach wrote alla giga, and it is supposed to be fast. So old recordings include still, which are based on older editions, they still play in slower tempo, and then newer recordings who already had access to new information, they will play faster. So this makes Bach's compositions available for any keyboard instrument, and it is nothing wrong to play it on piano, and nothing wrong to play it on clavichord. It would be just whatever instrument gives you the best of instrument you make from instrument. And some people say that Bach didn't like piano. He had chance to try early fortepiano. He didn't like it because it was not yet developed. It was worse than harpsichord. It didn't have big sound, it didn't have good action, and it was just small box. So of course he didn't really like it. Harpsichord was so much more developed during this time, and organ, of course. But if he would have access to the piano as we have now, which has combination of all these keyboard instruments, long sound and short sound, loud and soft, I'm sure that he would admire this. And because we all mostly play on modern instruments, we need just to do the best we can, making this instrument and this music being blended perfectly together. So there are no limits for the instruments. And what is next?
Okay, I will take care of that.
So probably editions for this short preludes. There are so many editions, and lots of editions of Bach's music in general. Some of them early editions, some of them later editions. It is interesting to see through the history of editions how music changed, how the understanding of music changed. Interest to Bach's music was probably raised during end of 19th century, beginning of 20th century. And here we started having editions of his music. Those editions are highly edited, and there is nothing wrong about this. When romantic music composers, performers, romantic style performers with their modern instruments started playing Scarlatti, Handel, Bach, other composers. They realized that this music was written for different instruments and something needs to be done with this. It needs to be adapted. So they did their best to adapt this music for modern instruments so it would be played, and it needed to be played in a different situation, different concert halls. So they started doing editions and they were highly editing it. Lots of pedal, lots of crescendo, lots of extra ornaments, taking off some ornaments, adding passages, making their best just to adapt it for the situation. And that was quite appropriate until 1950s, 1960s. At the like middle of 20th century, maybe second half of 20th century, harpsichord builders were able to bring instruments back to life. They were able not just to restore, but build new ones, which would be similar to what people had in 17th, 18th century. And there was huge interest to authentic play, authentic manner of performing Scarlatti, Bach, early composers. And that, because of this, there was a high demand in manuscripts, research, and new editions started appearing. So early editions based on romantic tradition have lots of tempo changes, tempos would be suggested, metronome markings, dynamic markings. All of this is not Bach's. And then later editions are more clear what was Bach's and what was edited. I provided 2 editions. Preludes-Dr is the most trusted edition, German edition. It always publishes new version when new materials are found. Unless materials are not found, they don't republish it. But every time something new is found, let's say some new manuscript is found, new dynamic, new little staccato market, something, they immediately redo the edition. So Preludes-Dr it doesn't have any extra and just has Bach's text. This one is very good. I really like it for students. This is the Palmer edition. Probably most of you have this edition. It is nice edition because it has gray ink inside and dark ink. Gray ink is just suggestions for from the editor, and dark ink is all from Bach. So this way, at least we can make our choices. And Palmer is very knowledgeable. What he suggests is it makes sense, it is reasonable, it has dynamic suggestions, and it is up to us to play it or not to play it. There is nothing wrong not to play it and nothing wrong to keep. I always consider it. And it is good to consider some romantic editions as well, with lots of staccato, with lots of other suggestions, just to see what was interpretation. It is mostly interpretation. For students, it is good to I tell them that this is what we have from Bach, and this is what can be added. From what is from Bach, we cannot change this. Absolutely strict to follow. But whatever is gray ink can be changed, and we decide how to do it. And ornaments. I remember how once I was playing French suites. It was during my college years. And I found a German book, like that thick, all ornaments, German ornaments. And I was absolutely happy thinking like I will be now such a specialist in this. More I was reading, I realized that every situation is unique and unusual, and more, it is even more confusing when you know more ornaments, because some signs would be used in Spanish tradition differently. Then in this century it started changing, but not in this composer's tradition and so on. But we are lucky to have this Wilhelm Friedemann Bach ornaments. This is how it looks like originally, and this is the modern version. Bach is easy with ornaments. There are no questions how to do them. This is great. Thanks to Wilhelm Friedemann, it is clear that those signs, symbols, trillo, mordent, tone, they are used by Bach in traditional way. He doesn't do something different, because same symbols could be used in French tradition differently. In Renaissance, it could be used differently. Would be same look, but would have different meaning. Spanish composers would use same trillo markings, but it would again be resolved completely differently. So thanks to Wilhelm Friedemann Bach, we don't have any questions. And very important to play all ornaments on the beat. Because of Haydn and later composers, we have tendencies to play to the beat, like to the last note, and it is always on the beat. This is mordant. I listed them, of course, you know them all, but for discussion, if mordant, this wavy line with vertical line on it, played from the principal note down and back 3 notes on the beat. And trilo is wavy line. That one is played from note above, 4 notes in total. 4 notes. Let's say if trilo is for C, it will be D, C, D, C. And also on the beat note. That would be later maybe, but that would be Bach's tradition. Appoggiatura, the grace note. Bach didn't use that crossed one I listed in the second example. Bach didn't use the crossed one, but that would be later. His sons already used this, so that would be to the beat. But he always used on the beat. And John would be around the note. Sometimes he would combine John and trilo together, and his sons used a lot of these combinations. Carl Philipp Emanuel really liked John and trilo together. Just trilo first and John after, or otherwise. And trills played in a harpsichord manner in Bach's music. When we play trills in romantic music, we can use rotation, just some, and it keeps going, some trepidation. On harpsichord, trills are played by fingertips when each key should move back and forth. So rotation cannot be used on harpsichord because it will stop treating. Keys will not go back. So it is exactly like treating for each note, really moving fingertips for each note to make the trill happen. Not doing any blurry trill sound. That will not work on harpsichord. It just stops playing. And Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach described Bach's position of the hand. Interesting how he was playing. So I found what was position of the hand when Bach was playing. He suggested following that all fingers should be curved, very round, and fingers should go perpendicular to the key. At the same time, wrist is very relaxed and calm, as well as forearm and elbows, very relaxed and calm hand, not busy. Fingers are played very clearly. His touch would be not legato and not staccato, in between, something like non-legato or poco legato rather. Carl Philipp Emanuel describes it as notes would be disconnected, though not separated. So they're like not too crowded together. And that would allow absolutely clear playing. Bach was very detailed in his playing, very expressive, though he would be very balanced. He would not allow too much of tempo changes. He would not allow some overlapping when notes go together. So this is about ornaments. And maybe we can, do you have any questions about ornaments? Is it all clear? You probably know all of this because Bach doesn't have too much.
I do have a question. I was hoping that you were going to play them and tell us how to play them.
Sure, I can play the preludes.
Yes.
Yes, I am going to play them soon. Let's see. Yes. So this is the preferable order. The order is, you can choose, of course, any order. The order was made up. It is not Bach's order for short prelude. And there are preludes here, BWV numbers. There are preludes which are written in 2 voices and preludes which are written in 3 voices. So preferable to start from 2 voices, and then you can decide which one according to the student's ability to learn and desire to play. I always play different ones and they choose. And then later you start learning 3 voices preludes and then move to inventions and sinfonias. Inventions are 2 voices and sinfonias are 3 voices. So, BWV, you probably know that this is just numbers which started existing in 1950s. It is German catalog for Bach's compositions. This BWV numbers is just a German abbreviation for Bach's works. So this is like opus number. Each composition of Bach has this unique number. Fingering. Do you know what kind of? Yes?
Sorry, what does BWV stand for again?
It is Bach's works catalog, but in German. Yeah. So it's just abbreviation, Bach's works catalog. So yeah, because in when we play Scarlatti, it's just K for Kirkpatrick, right? And Mozart sonatas just arranged by certain musicians. But in situation with Bach, it is just catalog, which was made by German researchers and theorists, and it started existing since 1950s. Any other questions?
Maybe save it to the end because they're not going to be.
Okay.
perfect.
Then-
Go up to the mic.
Sure. The next one is about fingering. Did you know that Bach suggested fingering? There are only 3 examples of his fingering, and one example is, you probably cannot see anything here, but you can open this prelude if you have music. This is prelude on page, if you use this edition, Palmer's edition, on page 25, G minor prelude. So this is one of the examples with fingering, and it is very interesting. First of all, Bach suggests fingering for each note, not just like here's few fingers suggested, and then the rest of the notes are similar. He's very precise, like there's no escape every note, and he suggested this for Wilhelm Friedemann Bach. It looks like when he was writing this prelude for Wilhelm Friedemann Bach and suggesting this fingering, looks like the hand size was big already because it is quite wide, not for the small hand, not for the child, like who would have small hand less than octave. Something more than 1 octave, very wide playing, like nothing close. That was surprising to me to see that it is quite wide, more than 1 octave sometimes to reach. Another surprising thing for me was that he didn't ever suggest substitution of the fingers. Like to reach legato, we always do something like first, third to connect to next. Like when we do substitution of the fingers, he doesn't suggest this. And I was thinking maybe it was not in use yet. No, it was in use in French tradition. Couperin suggests this a lot and thinks that it is absolutely best way to have legato. Bach doesn't suggest this for some reason. I cannot explain why. So no fingers substitution. Though I of course use it when I play because of legato, but he didn't suggest. Another thing I noticed, whenever he suggests arpeggio for triad, let's say C major triad, it would be 1, 2, 3, 5 for the right hand and 1, 4, 2, 1, sorry, 5, 4, 2, 1 for the left hand. He never suggests 4. It is always symmetrical. 5, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5. Always same fingering for triads. So it looks like tradition of playing fingering for triads differently was already developed later. And use of pedal. Who thinks that we should use pedal in Bach's compositions? Can you raise your hand?
It depends.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because every time it is my students participate in many competitions, Bach competitions, and some of them participate on harpsichord, some of them participate on piano, and there are sometimes comments from some professors, like from Paris Conservatory or London Royal Conservatory, just like, no use of pedal for Bach. It is like inappropriate, or someone just like, why not to use pedal for Bach? It's just like, you're not playing on harpsichord. So there's always such a place to debate. Some people strongly believe that there is no pedal for Bach's music, and some believe that no, it should be definitely with pedal. When Bach was writing these compositions, pedal didn't exist yet. And then early fortepiano had pedal, but it was so very different from what we have now, because even if you would keep sustained pedal throughout the piece, it would not be too muddy because it was just small effect. It was not like we have it now. And I believe Bach would love pedal if he would have access to such instrument as we have, some Steinway. So he would love pedal. But I think that it needs to be just done carefully and not be noticeable. Just for slight sound effect or sometimes connection, but not much, not too noticeable, not drowning the music into this pedal sound. And dynamics. It is interesting how to use dynamics in a music which didn't have official dynamics. Bach didn't suggest dynamics for his keyboard compositions because instruments didn't have them yet. It would be strange to suggest. Again, it would limit something. Even later, composers still very carefully suggested the dynamics because people would still use harpsichord and fortepiano equally. If someone would suggest dynamics, it would be just limited for instrument. So how to use dynamics when we play on the instrument which allows dynamics? I think that it should not be too much of fortepiano or too much of crescendo, diminuendo, not too much of dynamics in general, especially for short compositions like short preludes. But what was expressive tool playing on instruments of Bach's period was shaping. And I think this thing we should use a lot. All music of Bach is motivic, based on motives. We'll just make small example. First prelude in this edition has this passage at the end. So on. So this melodic line is based on motives every time it goes from second note 2, 3, 4, 1, then again 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So it is not written by beat like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Each motive starts not from the beat but from the second note. How to understand it? Melodic line goes down and then restarts again. So just like a drawing, like music goes up and down. And noticing this motives makes it expressive. So when you practice with students, mark those motives. Then students learn to hear it without marking. But at first, mark those motives, practice with stops. So they know what is little cells of the melodic line and listening to them, stopping, shaping them. And then playing without stopping, but still listening to them. This would be the most expressive tool in Bach's playing, which would work for well-tempered clavier, for preludes in well-tempered clavier, for his symphonies and inventions, and many other compositions. Using dynamics, but mostly using shaping, phrasing, it, listening to the motivic development, because that was the most expressive tool when Bach was playing and teaching. Tempos. How should we use tempos if he didn't suggest ever? That is such a difficult question. They didn't have metronome. Bach didn't suggest tempos. It was puzzling me for a while. Why not to suggest tempo? He is so detailed in his music. There is no field to improvise. There is no field to add really many ornaments like many other composers of his time did. Why not to suggest tempo? And apparently it was part of the tradition. Tempo would be suggested mostly when it would be questionable, when you would not really know how to play it, fast or slow, like the situation with Jig in Goldberg variations. But people would understand tempo by time signature, the pace of the music. It was not specifically very fast or very slow. It was just understood by the pace. Let's say there's three quarter notes. So music needs to go by quarters and not by 8 notes, not by 16 notes, not by whole measure in 3. Or let's say 9 8 notes. Music needs to go by 8 notes. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That is slower tempo, unless it is Jig. Jig would be faster, still 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, but we know style of Jig, or we know style of Courant. There was no need to add tempos to that. People would know exactly how to play dances. So playing by 8 notes, by quarter notes, and sometimes by half notes, that would be the understanding of tempo. Just could be moderate or maybe faster tempo, but by quarters. And this is what gives us big variety in tempos. That would be also part of the interpretation. I mentioned about articulation, that Bach was using mostly polka legato. And I talked about history of interpretation of Bach's music through the time. Like at a certain point, knowledge was lost because people didn't play Bach's compositions by, they didn't perform it on authentic instruments any longer. Harpsichords were not in use. In 19th century, people didn't have access to those instruments. The harpsichords do not last long. They are designed in such a way that they last only for about 70 years, maybe 100 years. So most of harpsichords which 19th century performers inherited were broken already. They were museum type instruments. And people lost the knowledge how to play, how not just play them, how to build them. So it took so much time to gain this knowledge again. And those who were able to restore instruments well were actually American harpsichord builders. And the whole thing started mostly with Wanda Landowska, Polish pianist who started playing harpsichord. When she wanted to play harpsichord, there was no one available, no instrument available. So she came to the piano factory and she just asked to build one. And they built the piano with hammers, which sounded slightly like harpsichord. That was her instrument. And she started performing it, and it made huge interest. When she escaped Nazis and came during World War II to the United States and performed in New York, she performed Goldberg variations. There were no seats available. People were sitting everywhere possible. They were waiting in the lobby just to listen a little bit. This is how huge was the interest to the harpsichord and authentic playing. And that raised, like it was huge wave of the interest. Immediately people started researching, building the instrument, trying different things. Just in 10, 15 years, there was already multiple instruments available, some new additions, some performers who were playing in authentic style. So that changed the whole tradition of interpreting music a lot. And I want to play a few compositions for you. We'll play about 9, 10 preludes. And maybe after I perform them, I will tell how to teach them. Few things. I'm sure you know just few things. This is Prelude in C major. This is famous one in C major as well. This one is C minor prelude. I feel like this prelude is inspired by Vivaldi. Bach had quite huge obsession with Vivaldi's music. I feel like this one is somehow inspired by Vivaldi. This is also famous one in D minor. Another D minor one. This one is in F major. G minor. I recorded these preludes as small tutorials, and I can share with you. Um, each tutorial is like 9 minutes long, just how to practice it and how to learn them. Everything is simple, nothing really complicated, mostly done for my students. I record tutorials for them sometimes so they can practice and learn before the lesson. I can share this tutorial so you can see in details how to teach each of those preludes I just played. And let me know which one you would like me to show, what I would teach while learning with students. With 1 or 2 preludes as an example, which one would you prefer? First one. This one, right? I also wanted to say that I always try to tell students as much history and details as possible, makes them, even if they're 5, makes them be interested in this music. This music is very intellectual and probably most intellectual what we have in the repertoire for children. It has multiple voices, it has complex rhythm, it has ornaments. And for nowadays children, it might be difficult at first to start. I noticed that first preludes go a bit tight, kind of difficult, not too easy. But then after 5, 6 preludes, they're so good, they just learn it like easily. It just goes like a pattern. Certain things, they are repeated, the style. Sometimes eventually we have like 2 lessons and it is done. But at first it takes much longer, and do not give up, because some students feel like it is difficult. Try to make it as interesting as possible. Tell the stories about how Bach wrote these pieces, how he taught his, I know many stories from Bach's family because I keep reading everything I can, just telling something. And I always tell my students about instruments, and if possible, even on electronic pianos. You of course probably do this. Try to show students how it sounds on organ, how it sounds on harpsichord, show maybe instruments so students know that it was not played on piano. And my students love playing on harpsichord. We have harpsichord at Nelly Berman School, and I always teach them on both instruments if I have chance. So the first prelude. There are many ornaments in the left hand, quite complex ones. There are short ornaments which are mordents, played on the beat, but there are also more complex ones. And Palmer already wrote how to play these ornaments. This is measure 3, measure 4, measure 5. They have long trills. Those trills could be played and measured. Any amount of repetitions, like slower, speeding up. Trills in Bach's music actually supposed to be played a bit slower in the beginning and then speeding up. So this could be played like that. For students, it is mostly difficult to do so, so I teach them always counted version, but I tell that this also is possible. So whoever is more virtuosic can play faster trills, and counted would be absolutely correct way of playing it as well. So maybe learning those long trills first, and then it is difficult to coordinate with the left. So I always learn it at slow tempo. Maybe even slower if needed. I noticed that all students struggle with this coordination. When there is trill in the left hand, it is quite unusual. So practice first these trills and explain how to play them so they feel very comfortable performing these trills, especially long ones. The right hand in this prelude is written completely in harmonic pattern. So I would suggest fingering like Bach did for each note, like making sure that they don't hesitate according to the hand size. Some students have smaller, some have larger. And then I would ask them to play all the notes together. This would help them to hear the harmony, as well as it would make them thinking faster, 3 notes at once. And this music is not written melodically, it is written harmonically. So practicing just harmonies will help a lot to understand the harmony. You don't even need to analyze, just to hear the whole thing as the vertical pattern, not horizontal. Then you can ask them to play together with no drills, just like that. So be very slow. If you teach on electronic piano, you can turn the organ so they hear how it sounds on organ. Then you can ask them not just to know the notes for this, what is the other purpose. This is a very long phrase. It goes for 9 measures. And if you play these patterns like this, ask them to phrase that long. So you listen to the continuous harmony progression. With bass leading. Same can be done in this prelude. Like in any prelude based on harmonic motion. And then second half of this prelude is written in more free manner, more rubato manner. Bach uses this style quite often actually in preludes, when it is more harmonic and more rhythmic, more precise, vertical, and then more horizontal one, more like unmeasured prelude style. This is more unmeasured prelude style, which can be played like improvisation. And here we can take liberties for sure. The way it is written, the style of it would be like unmeasured preludes, which would not be used too much by Bach, but by other composers, and of course he was familiar with style like this. More like recitativa. So here it would be done with more liberties. And as I already mentioned, the second half of this prelude is based on motivic development. Not just it helps to memorize and it helps to hear 16th notes in more details. It also makes it being very expressive, very detailed in touch when you teach students to listen to the motives. And eventually, you don't have to ask them to stop. If you learn 5, 6 preludes like this, noticing motives, marking them, listening, working through this motivic development, eventually, when you play, let's say, well-tempered clavier, here are the motives. Then you don't need to ask them, they exactly know what to do. So they come to the lesson, they already have it, because it is essential part of polyphonic music and Bach's music specifically. Long notes, what to do with long notes. When we have something like that, remember Bach wrote for clavier. If he would play organ, he would never repeat it, just hold it whatever time. If you play on harpsichord, note would start fading away, but it depends on the instrument. Sometimes we think that, oh, harpsichord just plucks and nothing goes. It actually sounds quite long. If it is beat instrument, it can sound for like 16 seconds. And I would repeat this, restarting the low note when it starts disappearing. Let's say a student plays in very slow tempo, something like that. Then maybe it is appropriate to restart the low note more often. So what else would you like to know? Yes?
Well, everything goes along real smoothly until measure 15 to get that roadblock on B3. My students always have trouble there working the trill into the fabric of it.
Right.
So is there any special trick you use?
Let's see, fingering. I would ask my students to play trill by itself. So remember I told you that fingers need to move quite often. They cannot really move the fingertips. So each finger, it is like babysitting the kiss every note. And then slowly incorporating in the texture. And then playing this 5 times. And then including more notes. Under the tempo and then bringing it back to tempo. I think that most of difficulties occur when students play trills without really moving fingers well. So just like something like making rotation and tempo, it just doesn't work quite often. I think that those trills need to be very crisp and played in the right manner. When fingertips are moving very closely to the key, allowing the kick to come back so it can be pressed again. So very, very crisp drills. That would allow easier and more precise play.
If you have a question, raise your hand and come to the microphone. That way the people online can hear the question. Okay? It's just there's no other way to do it.
And would you like another prelude which you teach a lot?
D minor?
Another prelude if you would like to hear how to
The
teach.
D minor?
D minor, is it? So this one is actually written in similar manner because the last page is again like recitativa style, this so that could be played more freely. It is always difficult to come back to tempo. I noticed that last page is the struggle for students. Last page of this prelude is number 5 on page 14 if you use Palmer edition. Last page is tricky because of this tempo changes, especially last 2 lines for some reason. It also has this long trill in the right hand. This last 2 lines. So first of all, there's unusual trill at the end, more than for the middle voice. Normally we don't play such thing. So first ask students to play just a mordant. Then making sure that they first set the chord, then moving fingers. It is difficult coordination-wise to keep the frame of the chord and move fingers in the middle. For students, it is definitely difficult. So just make sure that third finger moves to second, second moves back to third very slowly. So they understand exactly which finger to move. And playing just mordant first, then playing it with the chord very slowly. Then there is long trill here. It can be played just as trill or 4 notes. It can be extended. So depending on how skillful is the student. Don't be afraid to eliminate some trill or make it shorter, just for necessary notes. That's it. If person struggles, no need to struggle. And coming back to tempo after this flexible passages, this one's. So I think that if 16th notes are played more freely, I feel like this is written in different, more horizontal, more recitativa style manner, then it could be slowly back to tempo in measure 43. Doesn't need to be in tempo right away. And maybe here in tempo. I feel like the reason this prelude is difficult just because those textures are switching every several measures, especially at the end. And just coming back to tempo is always questionable. How to play also end of 16th notes. And this is quite difficult. Mostly it should be played in the mid. The chords are quite stretched. So practicing each hand alone, practicing transition from 16th notes to measure 43. And calculating tempo, it doesn't need to be in one tempo, the last page, written in several different tempos possibly. Beginning, there are again mordants in the left hand, and especially it is difficult to play mordants starting from measure 15. 15, 16, 17, 18, just many mordants and trills occur at once. Practice trills first. Make sure that all ornaments are on the beat, that fingers are moving properly, slowly. This is the so all notes are played slowly. Learn the fingering for students so they know exactly how to play it. I think that students are struggling when they don't know. Just like notes are not written and then you're supposed to play it. Actually, for my students, I write trills in text. I don't know if you can see. I write them down. For myself, I never do such thing, but for students, they write it very accurately with notes being written on the stem, like on the stuff. So they see them at first, and then they get used to it, then they don't need these descriptions. But if you start with preludes and this first or second time they're playing this, they will not even want to practice probably this because it will look scary. So make it as simple as possible, clear. This is how to play, this is how many notes, this is the finger, so they are not looking back and forth and some description down. Let's say you use addition, which has like some additional notes. This prelude is, it has interesting pace. It is in 3/4 notes. Remember, I was telling you how to understand the tempo, that it is not in 8 notes and quarters. So this one is in quarters. The tempo can be slower and doesn't need to be too fast, but it is a bit on this faster way of playing it because it is in quarters, not in 8 notes. And now this could be played in 6/8 notes, and it could be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Look. Like this. Quite often students come and play like that. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. As it would be 6/8 notes. Interesting that Bach really enjoys the 6/8. He quite often does this. When you have 6/8, you can group by 2 + 2 + 2 or 3 + 3. So here he does this, like motivic development is by 3. But pace is by 2. So it is 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. Right? And it is very interesting. Students don't get it that easily. So make sure that in the beginning it doesn't start at 6/8 notes, but by quarters as Bach suggests. It could be by 6/8 notes if it would be written differently, right? So just interesting how he makes the simple combination, 6 notes in D minor being completely uneven.
Would you encourage the student to bring out the 2 by 2 by 2 in their playing? Or in other words, to overemphasize those notes?
I would not emphasize them, but I would think in quarter notes. So they, for practicing, they can exaggerate once or twice. But phrase is by, remember, Bach's music is based on harmony. It is not based on melody. Interesting that teachers during this time, they were not teaching from melodies. They were teaching students starting from numbers, figured bass. First thing they would learn intervals. Music would not start from melody, it would start from harmony, from order and from vertical line. And all these preludes are completely based on harmonies. So I always ask students to play this. So if you're looking at harmony, this is our response to how to phrase by harmony. First it is D minor. Next is subdominant, then dominant, diminished. So to me, phrase is in 2 measures. And I know it just because it is written by harmonies like that. So I would encourage students to understand that. I would point that it could be played differently, but because it is in quarters, that puzzled rhythm need to be in quarters. First, maybe emphasize with accents just for practice and effort. And then remember, you need this long line, 2 measures, and not each quarter note emphasized. So just thinking in quarters, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, and that's it.
We have a couple questions from our online participants, so maybe we can go through them. I'll read the first one. The first one comes from Deborah. She had a question about the C minor prelude. She asked about the rest on the left hand B2 and if you use pedal. And do you observe that rest, or do you hold the chord through it, or does it depend on the situation? This is the C minor prelude.
So C minor prelude is number 3 on page 9, if you have Palmer edition. And if rest should be used, right? And if pedal should be used. This one is definitely written in harmonies and not in melodies. It is one long phrase which doesn't have rest, just keeps going on and on and on for 3 pages. And it is very interesting how Bach wrote it, just very unusual texture. he writes 16 notes in the right hand with the rest, 16 rests, and he writes 8 notes in the left hand. I think the reason he did this is because left hand needs to be leading hand, a leading hand. On harpsichord, it just plays a bit longer than right hand. That makes it sound more important. On piano, you can just make it louder. These notes I'm talking about. The third beat. On harpsichord, I hold them longer, as Bach suggests, 16 notes here in right hand and 8 notes in the left hand. On piano, we don't need to really hold differently because we can just make sound quality being different, a bit louder, a bit softer. In this prelude, I do the rest on second beat, but not exactly. Because that makes it a bit metrical. So I do it almost in time, trying to make the phrase long enough. Lifting, but continuing. So it keeps going, like length is, in Bach's compositions, timing is endless, eternity. It just starts and stops in certain point because we stop observing it, but this piece could be continued. He doesn't have the sense of endless time. It's always starts with certain pace and it could be continued on and on and on. His phrases are not limited. Every beginning of the phrase, every end is beginning of new phrase, and it feels like it could be built up for eternity, for endless times. But at a certain point, it just stops developing because we stop observing it. So I have like this vision of the time here. Pedal, maybe small pedal, maybe just direct pedal for the quarter notes. Definitely not over pedaling a lot, not doing this. Which sounds very nice, very beautiful sound, just not in a right manner, I guess. Would just detour from the authentic style a lot. I would never imitate harpsichord on piano. I always use whatever instrument gives me. If I play on organ, I use all privilege of that instrument. If I play on double manual harpsichord, I always plan how differently will be my sound. I don't use always same sound. I could use double string, I could use lute with mutation, I could have single string or different manual, both hands. I change colors depending on what instrument I have. If I play piano, I use pedal and I don't want to imitate harpsichord and pedal on piano, though I would still keep in mind the manner of these compositions, the style of these compositions. So over pedaling is not preferable, but a little bit of pedal for colors, maybe for bass, direct pedal would be nice. I noticed when I start teaching this prelude, students get a bit confused what to show. Like if you show all the voices, they sound like this, I will exaggerate. Like what to make more important. And I feel like it is bass, then harmony, then left hand. So it is like such loop. Da 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 bum bum. So because Bach wrote third beat with 16 notes in the right hand, it should sound inside of the left hand. This way we will achieve this continuous motion, that it will not be too vertical, too steady. It will be musical and continuous. On harpsichord sometimes I overlap this, like this. So I'm like holding longer than it's supposed to be, just to achieve this sound of pedaling, more continuous sound. It is interesting how he writes it. He just does it with three notes, 2 notes, 1 note, always like reducing the amount, which makes natural diminuendo on any keyboard instrument of his time. I also would practice this with students. All verticals like this to achieve long theme, long phrase. And it is difficult for students to play this third beat soft enough. How to achieve this? Palmer suggests different fingering. I would not suggest different fingering. Like he suggests to play 3-2, like 3-2-1. It makes it very busy. though I see his intention, he wants to make it very clear. I would still use first finger. It will allow maybe faster tempo and would allow more sensitive touch. Playing right from the key very closely with only a fingertip. Many young students use the joint of the first finger. It needs to be just a tip. Otherwise, first finger will be always heavy. Naturally, when we set the position like this, first is laying on the joint. Holding first finger on the fingertip makes the trill spin more sensitive, makes it more fast and just more movable. And I know for young students there's always a bit of the struggle to put first finger in the right position, but with situation with Bach it is quite crucial. Makes it more even, more crisp, more even lined up together. So what else would you like to ask?
You have a question, come to the mic. There's one question online I'll ask.
Do you want the mic from them, Jonathan?
Yeah, I'm fine, I have a mic here. One more question, Anna. Question, do you have any suggestions about how to memorize Bach?
I always divide on sections any composition, like having absolutely clear understanding of how it was written. I know for 5 years old student it is difficult, but for 7 years old student maybe less difficult. I always try to understand how it is logical, how it is written, and explain it to the student. This way, it doesn't make it just a sound, just combination of sounds, right? Like when you just play, like waiting when my fingers will memorize, especially that one. That could be memorized by muscle memory. And then in certain point they just like, oh, where am I? In the middle. Divide it on sections. I made like 6-7 sections. And each section has something. Let's say middle section has lots of bass D. And then it changes few times. A detour to E flat and back to D. Understanding that, then what changes, what stays the same. Position-wise, memorizing position-wise. But I think more logic you have in any piece, not just Bach, more logic you have behind these notes, more convenient it becomes. It is just easy, especially for fresh mind. Like we have, for me now it is so much more difficult to memorize. When you're young, everything is so new, and all this information is fresh, and it is not just something kids forget quickly. So make everything logical, and then several ways of memorizing. Memorizing by hand position, just like how hand moves, how it feels, what is the position by chords. Memorizing by melodic lines. Let's say you have passage which is more melodic. Dividing this passage into motives. Memorizing just 2 beats at once. Then doing 3 beats, then doing more. Or if you have long passage, this is very helpful. Let's say long, difficult passage. The students might remember beginning, maybe 3 beats, and then they kind of struggle. Start running marathon from the end, like having the end, last beat, last 2 beats, last 3 beats, like playing, building up. Then beginning, first beat, second beat, third beat, middle, this. It is amazing, works like magic. Of course, you know such simple things, but simple but works so well. I still use it myself when I practice.
Any questions? I guess I'll ask one. At the beginning of your PowerPoint, you gave us a list of all the 2-voice preludes and the 3-voice. The order that they were listed, is that kind of an order you recommend for difficulty or instruction, or were they in numerical order? I can't quite remember.
It is just mostly to list 2 voices and 3 voices. I choose always differently. It always depends on the student. I never have this plan, like solid plan for all students at once. It is always very different tempo-wise. Each interpretation will be different for each particular individual. So what I do, I always start from some shorter ones, just which has less text, so it is easier for young students to learn. My students start learning when they are 5 or 6, if I start them from the beginning. But it is not wrong to teach someone who is 13 or 14 or 15 with preludes, because they are still very advanced compositions, just short, what is great. which allows to accomplish those compositions quickly. They're just short time-wise, small, 10 measures, 12 measures, that is all. And I have several in mind when I try to choose, and then I make them choose, and I always make my students choose, so they feel like they participate. And they need to like what they're playing. So I'm playing several for them, and then sometimes I ask them to make a research. Here are 5 preludes, listen to them in this particular recording or these 3 recordings, and listen with the music, decide which one you would like to play, try with your own hands, make your decision. And interesting, even like tiny little kids, they love making these decisions, and then eventually when they're older, they are very strong in their choices, and they have opinions, knowledge, and they feel like they are professionals.
So, I have a question, by the way. Just to clarify, what's the youngest age that, or level that you've taught, let's say, begun to teach the prelude?
5, and teaching on both on harpsichord and on piano. All the age, there is no limit.
And do they know how to read music by then, or are you teaching them by rote?
I always teach with the music, with the notes. I prefer not to teach from hands. Even I know for little kids it is so easy. They're so quick. It is so much easier. And I have many students who come to me when they are 9 or 10 years old, and they have so much struggle reading. It is easy to start the child quickly when you just show from hands, play like this, they play this, they learn it, and they cannot then use music practicing. And eventually when they're 8, 9, they slow down so badly. It just stops, progress stops, because compositions get more difficult, they depend on someone's hands. So it is a challenge, because you have to insist and convince students that they need to read music, and they refuse sometimes. They are trying to memorize as quickly as possible, almost like sight reading memorizing, like that. And they sometimes on grand piano stand is too high, right? They have to watch like that and watch like that. So sitting like this, so like observing both fields. And at first I noticed everybody is slow maybe, but I'm not scared of this. I know that eventually it will be so much faster. Like it takes, for my students who started with me since they are 5, it takes them maybe 1 or 2 lessons to learn one of those preludes. They come quite often memorizing already. I don't have to suggest fingering. I don't have to suggest anything from what is written in the text. Mostly we work on interpretation. And this is my paid off situation, because I was working very hard when they were little. And it is very different when they come like not reading notes, not knowing bass clef, not knowing how to practice. And then it is not like forget everything you were taught wrong. No, it's just very flexible and not breaking them, trying to add little by little this information. They don't even notice when they start using text a lot. Practicing with the music, memorized, but still working with the music, working on hands alone. It is important to be able to depend on your own vision of the music when you're 10 or 12 and not on someone else's hands. Then you're kind of disabled to learn any other composition. So I have a student who is 4 now, and she's playing several preludes of Bach. She started with me when she was 3. And she knows all the notes fine, sight reading, learning about 8 pieces per lesson, little
She
pieces.
reads?
She reads, yes, just like everything. She learned this faster than she was actually reading letters. So that.
She reads notes on the staff?
Yes, she plays several preludes from this book, and she works with the music, and she knows everything. I don't have to tell her the notes.
I'm flabbergasted.
So I think that
Is that normal?
no, I don't think it
Just
is.
checking.
It is really lucky situation.
I mean, it's normal for your students.
No,
Okay.
my students are all different. Some of them are very fast, some of them are slow, and I don't have same recipe for every student. It is just some of them learn very slowly, and some of them are not very slow, and I'm trying to be completely different for each of them. Some of them are very intellectual. You have to explain absolutely everything. Some of them you just like play just like that, and then they just get this. And yeah, I'm trying to be sensitive to the student. But starting professionally, I was teaching at the conservatory for a long time, and where I was teaching it is called Special Music School. Special because it is like Curtis Institute type. Curtis was originally established by that type. There's like Gnesins Academy or like so there are some European conservatories like this, where students when they come by age 5, they need to know notes, everything, and then they are professionally oriented from very beginning. There is big competition for them, and they get kicked out if they are not playing their exams and concerts. And those students, I was studying at one of those schools. It is quite serious. You're supposed to play every several months. You're supposed to play big program like 30 minutes long, practice in many hours. So that was professionally oriented school, and when I came here, I had to really change my approach, because it's not just like you come to the lesson, everything is memorized. Why not memorize still, right? Yeah. So you have to actually walk through, and it is interesting, but I think that keeping professional standards, knowing even, student might tell that, look, I never want to be a musician, that is just fun. I have to be a basketball player. And you know that, okay, why to work hard, let's have fun. Having fun, but still the student can change mind. How many times it was someone who like 15, just like I discovered that they have love to music, for music, and have no tools. Poor person comes and struggles and doesn't have really much opportunities until, I know, late, until they build up something when it is difficult to build up. So I always try to not separate amateur, not amateur. Those who practice less, okay, fine. Still having those standards, slowly but standards. Maybe less pieces accomplished, still learning professionally.
Do all your students get preludes?
Yes, they also play inventions. I played most of Bach's repertoire myself, performing all concerti with orchestra, both on piano and harpsichord, playing all partitas, all well-tempered clavier completely, all suites. Like, I don't know, probably would be few compositions which I didn't play. And my students play all preludes. They get it with Czerny. The repertoire which I always use is Czerny. For technique, they start playing Czerny, Germer when they're little, and preludes. This is essential, something what we constantly have, constantly. Finished one, next one, next one, next one. Because this repertoire is very deep intellectual. It creates good technique. It creates good understanding of the phrasing. It creates good balance in between hands, what is very difficult for pianists because we have multiple voices. It creates good understanding of time, and you're supposed to feel 68 notes. You're supposed to sense quarters and so on, like keeping one tempo. Very, very useful. Maybe it may be challenging, but very useful, and it is a platform for whatever you want to play next. Mozart, Beethoven, and Bach in my repertoire is like always. I always use Scarlatti as well. There are 500 something sonatas. My students play Scarlatti, they play Handel. Those who are interested in Baroque music, everything before Bach, there are so many compositions. But this repertoire is something what they constantly have.
I have a question. So would you recommend beginning the two-part inventions after they play some of the three-voice preludes?
It can be done, depending on the student, can be done together. Just playing several of those and play maybe more difficult invention. And doing same thing, same voices, analysis, how voicing works, subject, everything like this. I love teaching inventions a lot because it is very smart, very clear structure behind this. Analyzing, writing all this subject, counter-subject, imitative text, how it works. I think when sometimes we might feel like student is too young, might not understand this, and sometimes they can. Sometimes they all of a sudden grow so fast that it's even not predictable.
I have another question from Deborah. What Bach pieces do you offer your students before they touch the preludes?
This book of Anna Magdalena Bach, those compositions are not, we don't know by whom they exactly were composed. Apparently many compositions of Bach are questionable as well. We consider them as Bach's, but Bach's family was working as a family. They were working on same projects together. There are manuscripts where would be hand of Johann Sebastian Bach and several other handwritings. Like one would be his son, one would be his student. And his wife was also composing. Like they were all very musical, and Bach's family was known as musical family or family of musicians as professionals for a long time before Johann Sebastian Bach came to his career path. But his uncles, his grandparents, it is a big family which had traditions. They had their own secrets, and they were not sharing them with everybody. It was something what they would keep, not being shared. And compositions as well, what would be the repertoire, they would copy it by hand. Bach would work on many compositions from other composers. He liked Vivaldi, he liked Italian composers a lot. He liked French composers. He definitely knew Couperin, and there was a correspondence in between them. It is missing, we don't know what they were writing. Were they actually close friends, François Couperin, or were they sending each other compositions? Definitely French suites were inspired by style of Couperin and Rameau. And Bach would copy by his own hand those compositions, so they are preserved in the family. It was not something you go and buy in the store. So people would copy and keep. And sometimes they would lend this for money, just like, you can borrow this composition for that many days. This is what Wilhelm Friedemann Bach did at the end of his life. He was making money by just giving manuscripts of his father, so people learn from them, they copy and they return, and they give certain amount of money for this. So that was quite useful. There was not like library or something. People would copy and keep collections in their family. That would be treasure. And then they would recopy it. Because of these copies and many other copies, sometimes it is difficult to tell who composed things. And written by Anna Magdalena Bach, but who originally made these compositions? She was using it, looks like, for younger kids. There was not just Bach himself teaching his students and his kids. Apparently, all the sons would teach younger sons. It worked like that. They all were teachers. They were using these materials which they preserved for family for generations. Anna Magdalena Bach was one of those treasures.
Do you have any other questions? I'm not sure, are any outside of his family members who put into the Anna Magdalena Bach? Outside of the family or just in the family only?
It's possible that it is outside of the family because
Okay.
Bach was doing following. He would, let's say, copy Vivaldi by hand, and then he would write his own composition inspired by Vivaldi or making transcription. There are multiple transcriptions by Vivaldi or other composers which Bach made. So possible that there are compositions of other composers and not just family members.
Because I think sometimes we see that something's written by Petzold, you know.
Yes.
But they think it is. They used to say Bach and now they say Petzold, so I was just.
Absolutely. So very possible that it could be written by other composers, and that collection was just made as a little book because they could not just buy such thing. So she accurately wrote it so they can practice, so children could practice this.
That's clear, thank you.
Any questions on Mayor Johnson?
I think we've got them all. You
Great.
want to take over?
Yeah, excellent. Well, let's give our presenter. I feel like it makes me want to practice, but also makes me want to be a better teacher too, just doing all the work you put into it, and the playing was wonderful. It was like it was like looking at a gem or something. Each one was really beautiful played, so thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Wonderful.
I'm happy you came and happy to share.
Wonderful, great. We hope to hear from you again soon. Yeah, and you said you had tutorials that you could send us
Yeah, you can send tutorials. I recorded them yesterday in case someone is interested. I knew that I would not have too much time for each. I made mostly, I make them oriented mostly for children, so it's some talk about 16th notes being even or something like that. But because I use these tutorials for my students. In addition, I started it during quarantine because I could not play for them in the room. So I started making tutorials, and because I had little students whom they didn't know notes yet, I didn't know how to teach them online. So these tutorials were so helpful. Apparently they got so spoiled that then they would just send me messages, can you send me tutorial? I was so overwhelmed. I recorded about 400 tutorials, and first they were like, I was re-recording them, like this student plays this, record and send, and record and send. Then I just posted them all online, and I just like organized like playlists, and whatever piece they play, they go and check and learn from this, like how to play it, what needs to be done, main things, and these tutorials work. They don't come already playing the piece, learned it from tutorial.
Wow. Great. Can we put a couple on the website? I guess we could.
But they're very simple. There's like they're for kids. They're not tutorials for how to teach kids. they are for kids. So it's just like make sure 2 quarter notes are here. Here is the rest. Here is that. Here is that. What to consider to learn.
Right.
Mostly helping to start with.
Are the tutorials on your website or?
No, I can send you. There is YouTube channel. I can send right away.
Yeah,
they-
send us we'll get a link, and Anna will send us a link to her webpage where she has these many tutorials that she gave to her students, and we'll share them with our members.
Very good. Well, I guess that concludes our meeting, and very glad that this is an option in case there's construction going on over there again, and worked out pretty well. So
Yeah, and piano is very nice.
Yeah.
good.
So
We'll say bye to our people online.
Yeah.
We hope you'll be here next time.
Hi, folks. Thank you for coming online. There was a little bit of a Wi-Fi issue at the beginning. Deborah, I will get right back to you with some information about the business meeting. If you just stand by, I think I can give you all the information you need for your notes. I think that's about it.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next I'm gonna say next week, next month.
Thank you. Okay, I shared the YouTube channel, and